We're realizing we were never meant to live like this. On the clock, on a schedule. Our mindset is shifting. Our intuition is being activated. And just breathe. We're opening up to other ways. We are going within for our answers of rest and peace. We are finding joy. So open up and let's revolutionize your mindset.
Jock, thanks so much for coming on. There was something that I read a few days ago. Brad Olson actually shared this, and I thought when I was reading, like, I had to have Jock come on because this is up your wheelhouse. So scientists discovered 400 miles below the surface of the Earth, they have found a huge underground water reservoir. So for those in the disclosure community, we've heard about all of these massive amounts of stored water. So that's not new news for a lot of people. Contrary to surface water, this underground reservoir is confined within ringwoodite. So I actually didn't know much about ringwoodite. It's a high pressure mineral that in extreme conditions absorbs water like a sponge. And according to estimates, this underground reservoir has over 3 times as much water as all of the oceans on Earth's surface put together. Its existence might change our understanding of the planet's water cycle by demonstrating how important the deep Earth is to controlling the flow of water around the planet. So much we talk about just the moon. These discoveries have the potential to fundamentally alter our knowledge of geological processes like plate tectonics and volcanism. Every time I say volcanism, I think of like the Star Trek. While providing fresh perspectives on the stability of Earth's surface water across geological time frames. And Jock, you are trying to get the sand people out of the sand with eyes open, sun in their eyes, that this Earth has been terraformed. We are living on a structure. And I would love just to have your perspective off of that news that scientists came up with.
Great. Well, thank you, Abby. And I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with me today. It's a beautiful day in Texas, and let's hope to bring or to shed some light on some issues. First, I want to mention that because I do talk about the continental terraforming theory. And by terraforming, I don't mean what Elon Musk and most people mean by terraforming, which is to change the climate of a planet. I mean to build the continents from below the ground up, not to shape existing features, but literally to build riverbeds, creek beds, hills, and mountains. So riverbeds and creek beds are the foundations for hills. That's what the true ancients who built our continents did. They built these winding water courses as foundations for hills. And then some of those hills are foundations for mountains. And we can see the evidence of this in various ways. But to get to your question, first of all, you mentioned plate tectonics, and James Maxlow has shown on his site Expansion Tectonics. He's a retired geologist. He was working for gold mining companies in Australia. And he has discovered that the idea of plate tectonics is false. It's an incorrect theory. And instead of plate tectonics, what we had in the past was a much smaller planet. So that's why it's called expansiontectonics.com. He's also at jamesmaxlow.com. You can find all the information. So the planet was approximately 27% of its present size, its present diameter. And it was a rocky ball with no oceans, no visible oceans. And because the people that the advanced races that created our planet he's not a created planet guy. He's just a guy that who believes that it was naturally formed this way and that it naturally expands over time. I believe that it was created as an engine of expansion by advanced races. So, but we know from his modeling, he brought all the continents together using precise measurements of the land masses, and when they were brought together and all the sloping areas, the continental margins were taken out, it was 27% of its present day diameter. So first of all, a much lower gravity because the mass is much smaller. So if the diameter is 27%, you can imagine that the mass decreases by even a greater amount than that. So the mass is really small. That means a really low gravity. That means that organisms are flourishing that are larger organisms all across the kingdoms. And that's what we see in the fossil record. We see larger animals, larger fungi, larger plants, larger insects. The birds are huge. Everything is huge because the gravity is lower and they're allowed to grow larger. So, but over time, as the gravity increases and as the mass of the planet increases, then the organisms downscale, they downsize all across all the kingdoms, and that's what's happened. So academia tells us that the reason that animals and plants are smaller and were larger in the distant past is that there was higher oxygen content. And it's like, well, that's a nice theory, but the reason that it was such a dramatic increase in size in the past is that the gravity was lower. So, I mean, we have fungi, we have mushrooms that are in Chad, Africa, that, and I'll send you a photo, you can insert this if you want. You've got mushrooms that are fossilized that are about 8 times taller than a person. And people are sitting in the shade of this, tourists are sitting in the shade of these fossilized mushrooms. And you're like, hey, this is like Alice in Wonderland, except it's on the surface, you know? So to get back to James's theory, so we have an expanding Earth, right? And the mass of the planet at 27% of the diameter of our present day Earth has the rocky crystalline ball has seams in it. And at these seams, it begins to come apart as the planet expands through the expansion that the people who created it created. They created an expanding planet. They created a planet that could expand. And where is it getting the extra material to expand? It's getting it from the ionized particles from the sun. So what's an ionized particle? It's just a charged particle. So the sun is releasing these particles 24/7, and they stick in what is called the mantle. The mantle is below the crust and attached to the crust. So the crust of the Earth is here, the mantle is there. The ionized particles stick in the mantle. Now, as the mantle swells, it gets bigger and bigger, the crust, which is attached to it, breaks, and it'll break. And then through that, there's an engine, another engine of expansion, which is the volcanic material that comes up. See, I would propose that the creators of the planet created the volcanic engines to give us an continually expanding Earth. So it was easy for them to create a 27% of present day sized planet with no water on the surface. And then over time, they created an engine of expansion that would work with basically no moving parts. It wouldn't wear out. It would the sun would increase the mass of the mantle would break the crust. Naturally, the lava would come up, the magma would come up and seal that wound in the crust, just like if we cut our skin, the blood comes out and seals that. Well, that's what the lava is doing. It's sealing that. But in that process, it's pushing apart, or it's not pushing it apart. It's sealing it. It's already been pushed apart by the cracking of the crust, right? And this is the oceanic crust or the continental crust, you know, in today's terms. So it doesn't matter. Either way, it's cracking and then sealing. So slowly we have the expanding planet. The animals are getting smaller and smaller and smaller over time. And the continental blocks that used to be joined at seams are being pushed apart. And what happens when those get pushed apart? Well, there's an ocean bed. Now, it wasn't filled with water then, but it became filled with water. How did it become filled? How did all the oceans become filled with water? Well, one theory is that Tiamat, the 5th planet, which academia doesn't recognize. They just recognize an asteroid belt, but those are planetary fragments. And Tom Van Flandern has plotted the trajectory of those fragments back to two separate explosions, which I assume were Tiamat and a moon of Tiamat. And those fragments those fragments are the asteroid belt. They're not asteroids. So if we put all those fragments together back in time, we have Tiamat and a moon of Tiamat. And Mars was a moon of Tiamat, by the way, that didn't explode. And Tiamat, in the explosion, it was a watery planet, a super Earth, huge, giant planet. And that water could have rained down on Earth for 40 days and 40 nights and given us our oceans. But also, the oceans might have come from underground water that you have mentioned, that Brad Olson has spoken about.
Yeah. Well, Brad didn't speak on it. He just shared the information. And I think it was just sharing because so many people have discussed about these again, within disclosure, these large pockets of water. Therefore, it's backing the knowledge of inner earth beings, how civilizations and beings are living full lives within the inner crust of the earth. So if we started out really small, because so many people have said that, we have our surface, but then once you go, like 3 miles past down, it becomes a honeycomb almost. So if you start here and then as you're expanding, that opens up to being able to create a honeycomb-like structures, right? Because then you can build structure and build structure and build structure and build structure. It's interesting when you were talking about how the gravity is less. I think I love movies. I think there's so much disclosure within those. The last Godzilla and the gorilla movie is they go into inner earth, and they showed as the further they went inward, there was less gravity there, and therefore that's why trees were huge, all of the beings were huge, plant like the bugs, everything were so huge as the more they went into inner earth, and there was an entirely different civilization down there. So, and then another thing that I want to bring up that was shown to me was, and this is going to segue into pyramids. So the step pyramids, which we have found, they're still finding. We haven't found all of them. They're still discovering them all over the planet. But that was shown to me that those were, and you and I have covered this a lot on your podcast, that those were machines. They were purposely, strategically placed around our Earth, and the entire purpose of them was to further terraform this planet because it needed a lot more wildlife. They wanted to bring more life here. And that current time, the planet wasn't hospitable enough for it. They needed more oxygen, actually. But what he showed to me was that these step pyramids, he said how they were built, it ionized the atmosphere.
See, that I was just thinking there's a great article called Pyramids as Ionizers. So thank you for saying that. When I was in when I was in the Bosnian Pyramids, I read this article, and I was there for 23 months back in the day. It was many years ago now. And so that article's been around, Pyramids as Ionizers, and it made so much sense to me. And so they're using the water. So pyramids complexes are generally, as far as I know, built next to water courses. And the water in those rivers is used by the pyramids to ionize the atmosphere, to bring health to the atmosphere. It's basically, so in one way, I think the pyramids are multi-purpose machines.
Yeah.
And Christopher Dunn, thank goodness for him, 20 plus years ago, he came out with Giza Power Plant book, and to help us understand that pyramids are machines. So I think that one of the purposes of these multi-purpose machines that the ancients built, it was to bring health to the biosphere by ionizing the atmosphere. Now, I want to make clear that the ancients who built the pyramids are distinguished in time from the true ancients, as I call them, who built the continents. Now,
Yes.
most people will say, well, nobody built the continents, that those are natural features. But if we look in the riverbeds and creek beds, we'll see the signs, the vertical sectioning that couldn't happen in sedimentary material, sedimentary gypsum here in Texas, or sedimentary limestone, sedimentary sandstone in other areas. And so we see these straight line vertical sectioning signs of construction that couldn't have been natural. So we know that the continents were built, the continental features were built. Now, later on, geological forces did create sort of granular material from erosion that was moving into low-lying areas, creating fossil beds. And so the Earth is so old that both theories have time to operate. So the original continental material, the crystalline concrete, was being eroded slowly day by day over time. And these granules, this granular material was washed into localized low-lying areas, thus geology's term fossil beds, not just fossils everywhere, but fossil beds. So this sedimentary material then caught the life forms or caught the dead organisms that were just fell in and fossilized them. And then we have the chronology of life, and people go, yay, geology, everything's geological. Well, I think it's just that in these fossil beds, we have geology.
Yeah.
And so the geological theory dovetails with the continental terraforming theory or the continent building theory, in that every single granule of mineral material that's in a fossil was originally part of the crystalline continental concrete.
Well, it was last year I was in Sedona and I was filming, and I sent it to you and you shared it on your podcast. All of the straight lines. We were hiking up in Sedona in the rocks, and I mean, it looked like drywall sheets. Just one place out there. Nature doesn't create 90-degree angles. Nature doesn't create straight parallel lines like that. That's not how, I mean, look at sacred geometry, right? The seashell, how it goes in a circle. Look at the tree behind you. That's not a straight line. That's not what nature does. And I know that's one of your main arguments, is because of all of the perfect angles that you see in these hillsides, in these mountains, just proving that they were placed instead of being naturally created.
Well, all we have to do is look at geology's term for these lines in sedimentary sandstone or sedimentary gypsum or sedimentary limestone. They call these lines fractures. Now, because the material is obviously joined and not fracturing, they have to call them joint fractures. So the literal definition of a joint in geology is a fracture in rocky material. And you're like, wait, a joint is a fracture? If you went to a carpenter and you said, I want you to build a table with fractures here, here, and here, and here, he'd say, you mean joints, not I don't build fractures. I build joints. Joints bring material together. Fractures are something that's breaking apart. So geology tells us that a joint is a fracture. And you're like, what the fuck are you talking about? It's an oxymoron, and it's meant to explode your brain and to make you go, I'll just put it on the test because my teacher told me that's what I should put.
Yeah, absolutely. And the main point of my entire podcast is just to get people thinking in a different direction, right? Just use your own intuition. You can go just like I did and, hike on these mountainsides, and your own intuition knows this didn't happen. This isn't natural. This isn't just, and that's why I made all the films and I sent them to you. Like, look at this. Look at this.
Right. Well, you'll notice on the Facebook wilderness pages where they have pictures of mountains, and there's just endless pictures of landscapes and nature. The one comment that people make, I'd say 80 to 90% of the time, is amazing. And it's like, yeah, it is amazing. So whether nature created this mountain, this crystalline concrete or crystalline material terrain that's so amazingly structured, you're like, how did this happen? How did it come into being? Nature's amazing. Or whether it was built, it's amazing either way. So I'm not asking people to lose their faith in the beauty of the planet. See, if I go out on a hike, I still think it's beautiful. It's just amazing in a different way that they built on such a large scale,
Well, because it's showing, we were taught that up to this point we are still on a constant trajectory of being the most intelligent species that's ever lived here. But when you begin to peel back those layers and ask those questions, then you really do clearly see, no, there was very intelligent life that has been on this planet prior to us. And that's really all that we're asking anyone to do, is just to be open to the concept that there have been other civilizations here that have had far superior intelligence than what we have. I mean, my God, we still have cars that run on gasoline. So,
Right. Well, in earth sciences, we have every single academic with the same false premise at the base of his thinking. This goes for Randall Carlson, who's a very smart guy. I respect him. But you see, if we're working from a false premise in any field of science, then we're not going to get to the truth of the matter. So when Randall Carlson goes out on the landscape, his premise is that we're the first advanced race in the universe.
Yeah.
Therefore, since we didn't build this landscape in Washington with these dramatic cliffs and these gorges, then it must have arisen by natural forces. And how do I explain by natural forces how this came about? Well, here's how I'm going to explain it. And that's what he does. If he gets rid of that false premise for just a minute or just a day or just a week while he goes out on the terrain, and he says, okay, what if we're not the first advanced race?
Mm-hmm.
That means that there were advanced races in the universe who may have developed planet building skills.
Yeah.
In which case, maybe this was built. Well, I'm going to look for signs of artifice, and I'm going to look for signs that it came into existence through natural forces. I'm going to see which theory holds up by the evidence. That's what I would suggest to Randall Carlson. That's what I suggest to all earth sciences academics who hold the same false premise that we're the first advanced race in the universe. Wow, yay, we're the first ones to raise our heads above the muck and mire and achieve self-awareness. Aren't we lucky? We're the first lucky species that just happened to become self-aware and then start building civilization and creating high technology. Now, in life sciences, it's the same way. So biologists look at an organism in a microscope, or a zoologist looks at a zebra and running from a lion on the Serengeti, and he goes, okay, those are natural organisms. We know that. How does he know that? Because he holds the same false premise as the space sciences and the earth sciences, which is that we're the first advanced race. We didn't build zebras and lions. There were no other races to build zebras and lions, and therefore they must have come into existence through natural forces. But what if maybe there were advanced races out there who might have brought some of these organisms to our planet? Maybe there was some genetic tinkering that went on. Maybe some of them arose naturally. Maybe some of them arose by genetic tinkering. Maybe some were brought whole cloth, like the octopus.
Yeah. I always like to witness the explanation. I mean, we are still finding new species here all the time, constantly finding new species. How are you going to justify that? How do they justify that? How do they answer that? That we're still constantly finding, even in areas where they'll say, we thought that we had already discovered everything that there could be discovered here, cataloged everything. Oh, nope, we just found another new species. In my opinion, there are constantly still being two things, actually. New species being dropped here because we have, this is one of the Eden planets, and we have such an amazing environment as a globe. It can host life here so beautifully. So any type of new creation organism, they will plop it here. All right, let's see how it does. And they literally plop it, and then they go about their business and leave. And they just see what it does. Another theory that has been going around is some of these newer species, because we've been hopping timelines so much, that they're bleed overs from other timelines.
And they might even be, in our multidimensional universe, they might even be just creatures that sort of slid over from another dimension in one way or another. I don't know exactly how it would work, but I assume the frequency realms are continuous. In other words, it's not like there's a barrier between the third dimension or third density frequency range and the fourth, and then a barrier between the fourth and fifth. I think it's just a continuous. So it's like, it wouldn't be out of the question that organisms from one realm could slide into our DMs,
And especially as we as a consciousness here, we are raising our consciousness, right? We're starting to vibrate at higher
Right,
levels. And then when
right,
we do so, that's when things begin to come into our awareness. They were
right.
always there.
That's true.
We just hadn't resonated up with that yet. And then poop, right now we can see them.
And you can see on a related note, you can see dogs and cats following us into 5D. They're raising their intelligence on in real time on the friggin' internet. You can see it.
Oh my gosh. You know what? Because obviously I do have animal communications abilities, but you can I have begun to be able to feel in some animals that they are beginning to test their vocal cords.
Mm, yeah, 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 yeah. They're imitating human speech because that's what they hear.
Yes. Yes. And it's almost you can because I can hear the thoughts like I think I can make that sound. And they're trying it. They're
Right,
trying. They are. They're actively trying to mimik it. And
right, right. I
it
mean, they're telepathic, right? So they already
yes.
have a superior way of talking, but they're like, well, those humans aren't really using their telepathy, so we're going to have to try the speech thing out.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, I mean, people wonder, well, how does animal communication work? Well, because they're telepathic. They have, and they understand everything that you say to them.
Yeah.
I, I'm really ready for that conversation just to permanently move forward.
Yeah.
I was just reading something a few weeks ago and they're like, oh, you know what? We actually think that that animal species might have some intelligence. It is the most
I
insulting. It is so insulting to
know.
continue in this day and age to read that type of muck. But yes, yeah, they are. It's going to be interesting. And so I'm seeing reading what I opened up with this underwater reservoir. I would
Yeah.
love to get your take on this. How much do you think that these pyramids around the world actually were tapping in to that known? They knew that this water reservoir was underneath, and were they possibly pulling up that energy field from them? Because when I was shown that step pyramid, they were pulling from down below up, and then so as they would go out, what they were showing, what they were emitting out was it essentially was attracting lightning, is what they were doing. They
Mm,
were
mm.
attracting that friction of lightning. And then because I got taken really like up off the planet, seeing down, and then all of the step pyramids when that lightning would streak this, it was like ting 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 ting, and you would have these massive lightning storms all over the entire planet at the same exact time. And so I don't know because this is just hitting me as I'm reading this.
Right.
How much is that underwater reservoir a part of that intelligent design of these pyramids around were they somehow pulling up energy from this known water? I don't know.
Well, I would say that let's start with the fact that the two groups of ancients,
Hmm.
the pyramid builders, whom we call the ancients, the megalithic constructors, whom we call the ancients, and we say they're the oldest ones.
Yeah.
I would suggest that there's another race or another group of races that's older called the true ancients, who are the continent builders, or the planet builders. And so the the way it worked in time was that the ancients, the megalithic constructing races, the pyramid builders, repurposed the continental concrete, the crystalline material, and they said,
Hmm.
okay, we want to make a magic recipe for our building blocks. And we're going to get some minerals from over here on the continent, and we're going to get some minerals from over here on the continent. We're going to powder them, we're going to mix them, add water, we're going to heat them, we're going to cast them in situ, in place, no dragging of stones. No, how did they move this? The
No.
massive block, they just cast them in place. They're concrete. It's like the way you are frustrated with the people who say that animals are stupid and maybe they're smart. It's like that I'm frustrated with the people who cannot see that these are concrete blocks. Now, we've already had scientific confirmation that the concrete blocks on the Giza Plateau are concrete, that those blocks are concrete.
Yeah.
So they found various things in the blocks that show that they are concrete, they're made. And I would propose that the Giza Plateau itself was built to bring the pyramid complex up above the Nile to keep the pyramids from being flooded out by the water from the flooding Nile. So they didn't just happen to have a plateau that was, so far above Cairo that just, hey, this is a great place to build pyramids in the exact center of the earth. No, they took the exact center of the earth and they said, let's build a plateau here so that the pyramids we're going to build on it don't flood. And you can see in the Osiris shaft, you can see the vertical lines of construction of the bedrock plateau. So it's not bedrock, it's crystalline concrete. So if we look at the history of the planet and we see that the crystalline concrete is the key to it all, the crystalline material is the key. So what does crystalline material do? It holds memory, it holds information, it allows plants to thrive because the plants can grow in this material, and they're like, oh, this is exactly what we need to grow. And then the animals can eat the plants that have the bioavailable minerals from the crystalline concrete or the crystalline material. So without the crystalline material, there'd be nothing here. So the true ancients who built the planet, #artifact Terra, they knew that the biosphere needed an oxygen-based biosphere needed this crystalline-based material. There's Alex Collier talks about other types of atmospheres that might not need crystalline material, but in this planet, we need it. So to answer your question, I'm just a playwright. If I was a deep intel scientist like some of these guys out there, I don't want to give you the TV scientist names like Neil deGrasse and Michio Kaku, because they only research deeply in the areas that they want to. They don't research the Big Bang and the origin of the universe, which is kind of sad. But if I was a scientist, I'd have a really good answer for you about how the pyramid builders wanted to bring up the energy from the water below the earth. But I think that one thing I do know is that in modern times, there was a pyramid that was built by a fella who just said, I'm going to build a pyramid. Oh, okay. And the water came around the pyramid, like it created a moat all around his pyramid. It just came up from below the earth. So the waters, the pyramids are pulling something up. Maybe it's meant to pull up water, or maybe it's just that, like you're saying, energy is being pulled up, and there just happens to be a lot of water below the surface, and so the water comes with the energy. I'm not really sure.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know the answers, and I want to go back to the fact that you mentioned you're a playwright. You're a playwright. And that's what's so beautiful about this Jock is to show everybody you can be one thing, but still question, and to a point where you are now looking at trying to not convince, showcase to everybody else, just question, dig deeper. And yeah, because those scientists that, we were discussing, the minute that you begin, you put those letters after your name, you then have to answer to something else. And I don't care, what those letters are, every one of them has something to answer to then.
Yeah.
Somebody asked me once, I actually spent an intense year and a half getting a certification recently. And they asked, why don't you just go and get your master's degree and become a therapist? Like, you could have had a master's degree by that point in time and been a licensed therapist. But now you're still in this gray area where people can't recommend you to other people because, they're licensing. And I said, because that right there, I would be pigeonholed, and there would be all of this red tape around things saying what I can and cannot do, what I can and cannot question. And they just create all of these boxes. And, even societally, like, I mean, we're seeing this play out in the grand scheme around our society. We were told it's not polite. You don't talk about politics. You don't talk about religion. You don't talk about wealth. Well, where did that get us? Now we're in a place where if you even do bring up anything political or about money, it's it's like everyone's banks come out, and you can't just have a conversation about it.
Well, it's so true. And in academia, we have to understand that if a professor talks about advanced races out there,
Mhm.
or multidimensional, interdimensional, extra-dimensional, inner-Earth races who are advanced technologically, they're going to be ostracized.
Yeah.
They're going to be censored. They're going to be possibly fired for being a kook.
Yeah.
So this is the problem, because the solution to so many problems in space sciences, earth sciences, and life sciences, I propose, is to get rid of this false premise that we're the first advanced race. Because as soon as we do that, then our minds are open to the possibility that some of this could be engineered. Now, I know that a lot of scientists are saying, oh, but you're just talking about creationism. I'm like, no, I'm not talking about creationism. I never think about God magicking everything up in 7 days. It just never occurs to me that it has anything to do with what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the evidence in the terrain that shows that this was built. And if there was some kind of omnipotent God building things, he wouldn't have to build in sections.
Yeah.
Advanced races needed to have they had limitations to how much concrete they could lay down at one time. I mean, they were really incredible with what they could do with concrete, but it's magic to us right now. Our engineers couldn't do what they did.
No.
But and the Bosnian pyramids is a real great showcase of that. But so in fact, we could talk about the Bosnian pyramids if you want. I don't know if there's time.
Yeah, I would love to really quick. And I wanted to bring up the individual that was and it wasn't a living individual, but it it was living at the time, that was sharing with me the step pyramid over in Egypt that was built there.
Yeah.
Because I asked, well, how was that built? And he was a very arrogant, very, very arrogant, non-human person.
Oh,
But at any rate, he said I did it with my mind. Like, and it was just, how else would I do it? Like, they were built and then he moved them with his mind. So telekinesis abilities. Um, so that was how that pyramid was built. I don't know how they did them in other places. I know that there has been a lot of talk that, if you create enough sound and vibration, then things begin to levitate and then they can be moved. Magnetism creates the same type of a atmosphere where you can lift up huge amounts of weight and to be able to move them. He showed me he was able to do it with his mind. So he actually crafted it in his mind, and and moved them and built them how he wanted to his specifications,
right, right.
which were given to him, by the way. This was it would be the same way of, if I'm building a house, I would hire a contractor. And this individual who I was speaking to had the abilities of a contractor.
All right. So I've never said this in a podcast before, but this is interview number 41, and it's time. Semir Osmanagic, who discovered the Bosnian pyramids in 2005. And the reason he discovered them is because he'd been out wandering the earth for 10 years, writing books about pyramids that he investigated in South America, Central America, at the risk of his own life. I mean, it was his life before discovering the Bosnian pyramids was already Indiana Jones on steroids. And people can see the tale of his adventures in an online PDF called The World of the Maya. And that is a real life Indiana Jones. So that's before he discovers the Bosnian pyramids in 2005. He comes back to his own country of Bosnia, his native country, and someone invites him to the museum in Visoko, which is a little village. He's never even visited it, even though he was born only, I don't know, 60, 70, 80 miles away in Zenica, north of there. And he spent a lot of time in Sarajevo, which is just south of Visoko, but he'd never been in this little village for some reason. And so he goes to this little village and he notices this hill. It's called Visočica Hill, which means high, by the way. So Visoko and Visočica both refer to this high altitude. The reason that they are called this is that the reason that they're so high is that it turns out that this pyramid complex, which is made of pure clay, was built over a prior complex. And the prior complex is called the Temple Complex. And this is from Vanessa Lyle Wittergren. Her guide, Raina, is accessing the Pleiadian knowledge base. So they said, okay, 34 to 35,000 years ago was her number. And by the way, that correlates perfectly with the radiocarbon dating of the fossilized leaves we found in the pyramid structure itself. So absolutely perfect correlation of the time period, and these leaves were dated, carbon-14 dating. So the Pleiadian knowledge base confirms the time period that it was built. And then it says it was built over an existing complex, which is why it's so tall, which is why Vysočica Hill, or the Bosnian Pyramid of the Sun, as Samir named it that day when he saw it, because of its northern orientation. That's why it's so high. That's why the kings of old would build their castles up there, because they had the vantage point all across the land,
Right here?
So there it is. There it is. Yeah, that's the northern face, that little tiny green triangle, the light green triangle, and the very top of that sort of darker green. A little to the left of that, there's a little tiny, there it is, that little tiny light green. That's the northern face right there.
Okay.
On the right of that is the eastern face. Sorry, on the right of that. Oh, you know what they did? They flipped the photo.
Oh.
They flipped the photo. This is supposed to be.
Let me see if there's any more.
They flipped it. They flipped it. So that's okay. That's okay. That's still the northern face, but the face on the right is actually not. That's that. In that photo would be the. Anyway, so just all we'd have to do is flip it. So so he noticed that this face of the structure has a really, really strong orientation to cosmic north. And it turns out that the orientation of this pyramid to the cosmic north is 12 times more accurate than the northern orientation of the Great Pyramid on the Giza Plateau, which has a very accurate alignment. So this is really, really accurate. It's really, really strong. Now, this complex was comprised of structures that are built with pure clay, alternating layers, soft and hard layers. So the soft earthquake mitigating layers alternated with the hard structural layers. What are the hard structural layers? They're stones that are unique. No two stones are the same in the Bosnian Pyramid complex. So each one was crafted uniquely, different shapes, different sizes, different widths, and they're placed next to each other. Soft earthquake mitigating clay between the stones, soft earthquake mitigating clay above the layers of stones and below the layers of stones. So everything was packed into this earthquake mitigating clay. So if there's an earthquake, the structure moves, the soft clay takes the energy of the earthquake, and this stays right there. Also, the layers of the hard structural baked clay stones, those layers are wedged in toward the center. And then if you go around this other side and you're looking at the pyramid from over here, they're wedged in this way. So you can kind of see under them a little bit. And then they're wedged in this. So they're always wedged in really steeply sometimes. And not just in the pyramids, but in the hills. So they built the hills around the riverbed. And they built the pyramids around the riverbed. So the riverbed was built as the foundation for the pyramids and the hills. So they're all joined through the structure of the riverbed. That's the key to it all. Once you see that, you go, oh my God, the landscape was built. They didn't put pyramids on the earth like you see in Central America, South America, Giza Plateau. They didn't set their pyramids on this. They built the landscape. And you're like, holy crap, where does this end? So I followed the riverbed out and I tried to find the end of the building. I couldn't find the end. That's why I developed the continent building theory, because I could, once you see the signs of the building in the complex, you can look for the signs of the building outside the complex. And it's the same building, it's just different material. At Bootsy Bridge, which is in the southern part of the complex, anyone can find it, BUCI, just go into the water, the little Voinica River there, and you can see where it changes from clay, which is what the complex is built of, to concrete. It's a clear line. Everything outside the complex is concrete. All those hills all the way to Kiselyak are concrete, west to Kiselyak. I explored them all. I have endless videos of all those hills that are really pyramids, but they're
Yeah.
concrete pyramids, and they're different from the Bosnian Pyramid complex. So those are the older pyramids, the concrete ones. The newer ones are the clay ones. So who built the Bosnian Pyramid complex? Well, Semir always said that if you come to the Bosnian pyramids, you're here for a reason. You have some connection with this complex in the past. And it turns out that in a reading with Vanessa, I asked her, I said, do I have any connection with this complex? She said, yeah, you were a guy named Ponis, Ponis. I've never told anyone this. It's time. You were a hybrid. You were a human hybrid, so hybrid with an ET race. And you were project manager, one of many project managers on this big project to build the Bosnian Pyramid complex. I don't know what they called it back then, but now it's called the Bosnian Pyramids.
Yeah.
And our bosses were ETs. They weren't humans.
Yeah.
So the ETs said, we need a complex here over the existing temple complex. She said, in the temple complex, before all of this, before 35,000 years ago, there were chambers where a man or a woman, a priest, we could call him today, a leader of a ceremony, would help a person take his life memories and put them in a large crystal. Now, that was going on in the temple complex. There are probably other things going on. And I don't know why 35,000 years ago it was decided that they needed to hide, I can't think of a better word for it, to hide the temple complex from us, the barbarians coming along. But they needed to remove from our knowledge that the temple complex existed. So they built a new complex out of clay that's completely different material from all the surrounding material going west to Kislyak, the concrete.
Wow. That's extremely fascinating. They discovered, and they're actually in 3 weeks, on March 18th, they're unveiling this in London, that they have discovered underneath, so not Giza, the pyramid, if you're looking at all three of them, the one over here to the right, underneath that pyramid, they have discovered underneath of it an entire new area that had all of these tunnels and chambers and everything, and they're unveiling all of this in 3 weeks that they've discovered. So, which is interesting that you're talking about something was built on top of another structure. And
right.
It would be interesting to see if it correlates at all with what you were talking about. But so what was shown to me in Egypt, from this individual was, yes, he was just following the orders of his own kind and dropped here. And just like any contractor, they literally just dropped all these contractors off all over the planet. And then they project managed by themselves.
Interesting.
All of these things. But yes, they would be very much so like a contractor and engineer. And that was it. And they were to do a job, and then they were supposed to leave.
Right.
But the idea was, when they left, it was with the idea of eventually coming back once this was more, because the individual who was here was sharing how hard it was to breathe here at the time. It was very hard in his lungs, and I mean, I felt it in my body. It was a each breath was like that, right? Because again, the gravity was different. And he also complained he was getting so much like dust in his lungs all the time. But his feet, like, it was heavy. It was hard for him to walk. Huge, massive feet. He was so tall. But it was heavy for him to walk.
Interesting. So he was like a giant. I mean, we have evidence all over the place of giants on the earth of different sizes, 12 feet tall, 25 feet tall, 70 feet tall, 100 feet tall, huge feet, foot imprints everywhere, fossilized bones that keep disappearing to the Smithsonian.
He wasn't, he was maybe like 10, 11 feet. I mean, he wasn't as, no, I know, like the ancient builder race, the ones that I even got, they're, 35 feet tall. I mean, they're huge, huge. And I know that this Smithsonian is destroying them as fast as they can. I mean, the rumor is that part of, was it Iraq, that because some Marines have come out as whistleblower, like quiet whistleblowers, that part of the invasion for Iraq was because they actually found a Stargate, and one of those
Mm,
Stargates was actually being guarded by this huge red-haired giant, and
wow.
this entire squadron of Marines encountered him, and it was
You're talking
terrifying.
about probably the Afghanistan
Was it Afghanistan?
incident where
Yeah.
they, yeah, he was in a cave and they lost some troops in
Okay.
there, and then they had to go find out what happened to these guys. They just disappeared, and they found their equipment scattered outside this cave, and like, uh-oh. And then this red-haired giant came out. He was probably 12 feet tall, long red hair, probably 1,100 pounds, is because they eventually killed him, but they had to shoot him about 100 times to kill him because he was like this beast, and he was the carnivorous. He was there to eat those guys.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think what I'm doing is I'm probably combining two stories. Yes, absolutely. That is a story I'm talking about with the red-haired giant and the Marines. But
Yeah.
um I did read something that part of the Iraqi war was part of it
Oh, okay. There
was
was a
a Stargate was discovered, and we essentially as our country, like, no, it's ours. So we just created this entire war as a cover to go in there and claim ownership of it.
and there was a red-haired being guarding the Stargate, or maybe more than one.
Yeah, perhaps, but I honestly, Jock, I could be combining those two stories in my brain because I read so much. I could be combining. So those could honestly just be two totally separate
Yeah,
separate
yeah, yeah.
encounters.
Right,
Um,
but the Stargate is the real information. The fact that there might have been a Stargate in Iraq, that was the reason for the war. That's the key to this.
yeah, and then they just created the entire war narrative to cover it up.
It
Yeah,
makes sense. It makes sense because there was no reason to go into Iraq.
there's no reason. There's
There's no
zero.
reason. I mean, there's
There's no.
no obvious reason. And people are like, well, they went for the oil. It's like we got so much oil in Montana.
Yeah,
We just have endless oil reservoirs.
yeah.
But as far as the Giza Plateau and the tunnels, I think that another frustrating, these big granite boxes into these little tunnels, because the boxes don't fit through the tunnels. And it's like, if you understand, or at least open your mind to the possibility that the Giza Plateau was constructed, they constructed up, they put the boxes in, they molded the tunnels around the boxes that were so key to them. And because I think that the boxes are probably there for the same reason that dolmens on the surface of the earth are there. So the dolmens are protecting us from the cosmic rays. They always have the ceiling one. And so there's enough room for a person to get in, or two or three people. And then you can have telepathic connection to inner earth races or races out there, because the rays aren't confusing your brain.
Yeah.
And in these sarcophagi, they call them sarcophagi, I think they're just boxes to block out the cosmic rays. And then above the boxes are also more concrete, crystalline concrete. They call it limestone in academia, but I think it's crystalline concrete to block out the cosmic rays. And then in these dense boxes, you've got this place where you can literally just connect to whoever you want to connect to, because there's no interference.
Yeah. I can't. I'm going in a few weeks. So this podcast is going to air. This podcast will air about 5 days prior for me landing in Cairo, and I'm very excited to use psychometry to get in there and put my hands all over, and touch everything, because again, it's crystalline. Crystals hold all the memory.
Right.
And another thing crystals do as well, especially the crystals within Earth, they all communicate with each other all the time. It's just this entire global web of communication. Just imagine the internet. I mean, that's what all crystals are. So you can connect in with a crystal in Cairo and be talking with a crystal on the other side of the world. But yeah, I'm really excited to get in those areas and see what all comes through and what I pick up on.
Well, and then we have because the life of the planet depends on the crystalline earth, then we go, okay, if the plants are crystalline, are composed of crystalline minerals, and then we eat the plants, well, that means that we're composed of crystalline minerals. And it's like we're all conductive of information. And that's another reason to go barefoot on some of this, maybe when you're in the pyramids, right?
Oh, yes. Yeah. Yes. I am definitely going to be going barefoot in a lot of places. We really lucked out in some of these chambers. We're going in at like 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning, all by ourselves, so that we can truly just be quiet and connect in and not have guards and people, because you're technically not supposed to tone and do singing like what I do. So I'm going to be
Nice.
able to do that, and we're going to do the same thing at the Sphinx as well.
Yay.
Yeah, I'm excited to do that. But just, it's all about, and I'm glad that you had almost 2 years in Bosnia. You had all of that time just to quietly be with the space and to truly explore it. I mean, I think it's hard for anybody's like, okay, go to Giza. You have 2 days now. Figure it out.
I know. I mean, but I feel embarrassed that it took me 17 months to think, I wonder if the riverbed is the foundation of the pyramids. I mean, I wish it was like 2 weeks. It took me, no, it took me 17 months of being there every day.
Yeah. But hey, divine timing, everything happens when it's supposed to.
Well, it was a beautiful summer day, the Phoenix is so placid. It has a really shallow slope angle, almost as if they built it to be a placid river so that it wouldn't take their pyramids down from the side. So it's like super placid, and you can just literally get super shallow. You get in it with your sandals and your shorts in the summer, and you walk up and you're like, oh, this is amazing. There's people inner tubing down slowly. The Bosnian natives are inner tubing down, and somebody's fishing for trout, and it's so beautiful, so that's what I did that summer day in August. So
Yeah. Oh, wow. That sounds incredible. Yeah, this planet is such a marvel. The planet is a marvel, and I encourage anyone, if you have the opportunity, just go out and explore it. And when you go, ask questions, be open-minded.
yeah. And
No.
just to round out what we were talking about, the hollow earth, as you mentioned,
Yeah.
that idea, let's not even call it a theory because there's so much evidence for it. Let's just call it that fact: the hollow earth and the expanding earth and the artifact earth all work together. They're not exclusive of each other.
Yeah.
So I think that if earth sciences folks just get set aside that premise that we're the first advanced race in the universe, everything is going to be hunky-dory in the future. Cheers.
Yeah, cheers. Yep, I think that's a great place to end. Jock, how can everybody, I know you have a great podcast. You have amazing guests on there. Where can they find you at? What's the name of the podcast?
It's called Transition to New Terra. And you know, I mean, I just do it occasionally because I only go by intuition. Speaking about the intuitive shift, I'm not like out there monetizing, trying to get like how much money can I make from this guest and this guest, and I'm just like, if it feels right, I just do it. And usually it's only like once a month. Most people are doing 5 days a week or 3 times a week, and I'm like, I'm not going to kill myself to do that. I'm going to be out on the terrain because I want to be out in nature. I want to be with the trees and the crystalline material, and occasionally I want to talk to somebody who's going to break the matrix.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I understand that completely. It's, yeah. I always I was actually talking to Alex Bloom a few days ago, and we were just discussing I would much rather be on the side of the table where we've had the luxury and the time to do these deep dives and to ask questions and receive information at a nice natural intuitive flow, where on the other side of the table, there is going to be a very large proportion of people that are just going to have a tsunami hit them at
Right.
once. Yeah. And I feel that it's coming. I feel it's coming. So continue to do what you're doing, because there is going to be a moment where everyone is going to be flooding, flooding to your information and going to want more.
That's
So,
good. Right now, the continental terraforming or the continent building or the artifact terra theory
yeah.
is just sitting there waiting for the populace to care enough about it to even think about the possibility that advanced races built these beautiful landscapes. The origin of landscapes might have been something other than natural forces. I think that the reason that is because people are so involved in trying to survive this crazy political realm that we're sort of stuck in. And I think we're sort of emerging from that chaos right now, and we're going to be able to take a breath pretty soon.
Yeah.
Maybe a couple of years from now, we're going to be able to take a breath and go, oh, we don't have to work to survive every single minute of every single day. We can go on a hike and relax. Then maybe people will say, oh, I can take time off from survival mode to even consider something like this.
Yeah, I agree with you. I do agree. And then, you know, on the other side of that coin, that's then when you realize, oh, that was all done on purpose to keep us that busy so that we wouldn't have the time to question and to look into things. And yeah, so
100%.
thank you so much for coming on, Jock. I really appreciate. I love our conversations. It's just nice. It's what a treat to sit down and just question and just be open to explore. So thank you so much. I appreciate you.
Thank you. I appreciate you, Abby Lynn. You're amazing.
Thank you so much. All right.